All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. It is Wednesday, and you know what that means. Time for some Wednesday wisdom and diving deeper into the lost wisdom of the Pharaohs and the Hermetica. And this has been a fascinating, fantastic series. I'm surprised we are already to section 17, entitled The Knowledge of Atum, or the Knowledge of God. In this chapter, Hermes teaches us how to attain knowledge of God. This, he declares, is the very purpose of human life, of our lives, ladies and gentlemen. It's said at the finishing of the last section, in the words of Hermes, or Thoth, in the ignorance of the soul, he said, "There is no greater mistake than to have the power to know Atum, or to know God, and not use it. There is no greater mistake than to have this power to know God and to not use it, simply wishing and hoping to know him." Hermes says and continues, "is a road that leads straight to goodness. It is an easy road to travel. Everywhere Atum will come to meet you. Look, and he appears, at times and places when you least expect, while you are awake or asleep, when you travel by water or land, by night or by day. This is because Atum, God, force, the universe, is all." Wow, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you got yourself some tea or a cold beverage if it's hot where you are. I know it's that time of the year for a lot of us here up here in the northern hemisphere, and maybe even southern. We are getting hot this time of the year. So hope you are comfy and hope it's a beautiful day wherever you are, because we are about to dive into the knowledge of Atum. And a lot of this is similar to what we talked about in our series of Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life. Wait, no, it's right here behind me. Living the Wisdom of the Tao. And so the Tao was described in very similar ways to this God, or Atum, that is described here in this Hermetic philosophy. And so, once again, this is coming to us from the Hermetica, The Lost Wisdom of the Pharaohs. It's authored by Timothy Freke and Peter Gandy. And we are reading this for purposes of teaching and commentary and expanding the mind so that we can continue to create within ourselves a deeper understanding of the nature of reality, of God, of the universe, of life, in order so that we can create a higher quality of experience through this understanding and this new awareness. Because remember, everything we talked about going through, and we just finished yesterday. Oh no, I lost my spot. Going through, we just finished yesterday the 81st verse, the final verse of the Tao Te Ching. And it was incredible. It was an incredible teaching, ladies and gentlemen. So if you missed that, please be sure to go back to that. But now, let's see if we can find our spot here again. Section 17, the knowledge of Atum. I didn't even have to skip. So it begins by saying, only like can truly know like. So to know God, we must become like God. How do we do this? Well, the next line says, to do this, Hermetics and Hermes advises us to imagine ourselves in all places at all times. Now, see, this is very weird that it starts with this, because when I was doing my meditation earlier, I was thinking, I've had this kind of thought lately about, while I'm working or something or meditating, about trying to, I don't know, have the thought of like trying to become one with God, but not in the sense of like merging yourself, but just trying to experience for a moment the oneness that is everything. My hair is a little crazy today, so don't worry about that, ladies and gentlemen. But to be able to be nowhere, nobody, no place, no time, no, but at the same thing, or at the same time, all of it. And this very weird, non-separate perspective to where you are everything you look at. But even more, you zoom out and you're all of that. And time is irrelevant. And I don't know, I learned that from somewhere else, but it's an interesting practice to try to get a new perspective and have at least some sense of feeling of this oneness that is described, that is, that was talked about by the words of Hermes at the end of the previous chapter, is this, like, everywhere Atum will come to meet you. Look, and he appears, times and places, while you're awake and asleep, travel by water, by land, night or day, speaking or silent. This is because it is everything. And there is a oneness. And just like the first verse of the Tao Te Ching told us, that the Tao that can be told or named or separated into all of these separate things is not the eternal Tao. But at the same time, it is all of those things, because it is all of the names. Because to say the tomato plant is not the Tao would be wrong. And so the Tao is also the tomato plant. And the tomato plant could also be another name for the Tao. Let's go back to another section here in Hierarchy of Creation, the Gods. We've gone through so much wonderful mysticism, and someone call it occult and esoteric. I like to call it spiritual philosophy, but it is those things. Contemplating creation, the being of Atum. See, mind cannot be enclosed because everything exists within mind. So think of this, that statement, when it says this in our section today, section 17, the knowledge of Atum. It says only like can truly know like. So to know God, we must become like God. And so this idea that was taught earlier in the being of Atum is mind. Atum is everywhere. Mind cannot be enclosed because everything exists within mind. And man, or we, man and woman, were created with our minds in the image of the mind of Atum. And so we have this little version of that we can use. But back to this idea of the oneness and trying to describe God, because what we're doing here in this section is the very purpose of human life, which is to attempt to attain the knowledge of God, or Atum, or the universe. I like to call it the Force. The birds are really having fun out here today. They're flying around and doing all kinds of stuff. But let's go back to what our section was saying, and we'll reference that a little bit later when it comes to coming to know God and what is God. Wow, that was a long section, the being of Atum. Quite a few pages. See, there is nothing which he is not. It has no name because all names are its name. It is the unity in all things, so we must know it by all names and call everything God, or Atum, or the Force, or Great Spirit, the universe. Simply put today, though, Atum or God, even though I'm going to say that every time. The knowledge of Atum. So once again, you're like, all right, Chase, you're rambling here. The purpose of life, as we're getting so far, is to attain the knowledge of God. And this is what Hermes teaches us. And so to do this, back to the section now here, Timothy Freke and Peter Gandy say, quote, Hermes advises us to imagine ourselves in all places at all times. So that was our reference to this, the Tao or Atum, or God, being hidden yet obvious everywhere. Is being known through thought alone, yet we see its form before our eyes. It is bodiless, yet embodied in everything. There is nothing which it is not. It has no name because all things are its name. In other words, it is all things. And so to embrace all opposites, for us to attempt to imagine ourselves in all places at all times and embracing all opposites, good and bad, light and dark, whatever polarities, just embracing all of it with zero judgment from a detached, zoomed out perspective. Maybe detached is the wrong word here, but to embrace all opposites, to know that we are immortal, to see ourselves as still in the womb and yet already dead at the same time. In the womb, in the process of being, created, of heading towards birth and yet dead at the same time. By expanding our consciousness in this way, we can merge, Timothy Freke and Peter Gandy say, with the mind of God. Wow. That is powerful, ladies and gentlemen. And this is the kind of meditation that was described that got me to the point that I was attempting to do in my meditation earlier, just by chance. I usually go random directions. Sometimes it's just where my thoughts are going. Other times it's a focused, manifestation meditation, an attempt to use an intention to hopefully go forward with that intention. Maybe that's a subject we'll get into in the future, is creating and manifesting. But I don't know, there's certain ways to go about that we have to double think about. You don't just want to dive into telling people, oh, here's how you become a manifester. Like it's a personal process. But if you are interested in that sort of thing, begin that study and that adventure on your own, because it's something just like they say about investing. The sooner you start, the more you'll thank yourself later. So, with that being said, this kind of meditation here, I'm going to reread through it here. Because if we can do this and we can actually get our minds for a temporary period to this state, then we really can begin to experience something new. If you don't want to call it God or, a oneness, we can begin to experience more harmony with the world around us and not feel so separate and detached from it, by attempting to see ourselves. And this is what Hermes advises, and we'll read this in his words on this section on the knowledge of Atum and how we can come to know God. This is this is amazing and mystical. If you're getting value, consider subscribing. But this meditation here, Hermes advises us, number one, imagine yourself. So if you have your eyes closed and you're meditating and maybe doing an om or an ah or something, to create a rhythm in the mind and the body. I find that the vibrations from humming or oming or creating a noise of some sort with a breathing pattern creates some kind of rhythm, and it helps the mind to focus and go places with your thought. And so Hermes advises us to imagine ourselves in all places all times. Now imagine that you're everywhere. You're in the past, you're in the future. You're in France, you're in New York, on the mountaintops and on the beach at the same time, simultaneously, like experiencing. No experience is out of possibility. So now this is important to contemplate. This really is a deep subject. Like imagine if you had like you're looking at a computer screen or you're, whatever, and you have this timeline and you can zoom anywhere all the way from the beginning of time, whether that was any time or it's just been a circle, but you can go back as far as you want in the cycles or as far forward as you want in the cycles and be at any place instantaneously. And you're actually know it all so well, you don't even have to look for what time you want to see. You just like, oh yeah, beep. And then at the same time, places. So time and space, anywhere, at any time. And then having the ability to have a non-judgmental perspective of everything that is within the entire experience, because it all is part of a story. See, things that happened 5,000 years ago led up to where we are now. And so to say that is bad would be just a personal opinion, because you could also say that it led up to where we are now. And it was just part of reality that was supposed to happen. And so this comes to the next suggestion by Hermes in this meditation. I'm just calling it a meditation because this little section here is like a way that we could, use some ideas to come to contemplate on, to come to know God. And so first, it was imagine ourselves in all places at all times. And number two, it is to embrace all opposites. To embrace all opposites. So I'm going to remind us, as we always do, because it is important in every episode. First, I want to say this. The philosophy that Hermes teaches, this comes from Timothy, Freke, and Peter Gandy in the first section, Prophecies of Hermes, is not just a clever intellectual exercise. It is about focusing the mind in deep meditation or contemplation on Atum, which is an ancient Egyptian name for God. And such pure philosophy is about rising above mere opinions to experience directly the quote unquote mind of the universe, or the force, or God, or Atum, or the Tao. And so it is above opinions. And using the God-given gift of our own little minds, we can come to know the big mind that creates and maintains the cosmos in beautiful order. And in this philosophy, for Hermes, spiritual philosophy is not opposed to science as it is for many of us today. And so the student of spiritual philosophy studies these things as a form of devotion to the force or to God. We're trying to discover it and come to know it, including the sciences. Now, the first words of Hermes in this teaching was that pure philosophy is spiritual striving through constant contemplation, meditation, thinking about it, constant contemplation to attain true knowledge of Atum, the one God. Now, that doesn't mean a separate being. That means what we've been describing this whole time, that we were told about in the being of Atum. Atum is the whole, which contains everything. We're talking about God here. He is one, not two. He is all, not many. The all is not many separate things, but the oneness that subsumes the parts. The all and the one are identical. you think, and we seem to think out here from our personal human ego perspectives, and the mortal, while also being immortal of our dual nature that we learned about in the previous section as well. But that we may think that things are many when we view them as separate. But when you see that everything, the world of the 10,000 things that was described from the Tao from yesterday, but when we see that all of these separate things that we think are separate hang on the one, and they flow from the one, God, force, Atum. And then we will realize that they are united, linked together, and connected by a chain of being from the highest to the lowest, and all is subject to this force, or what Hermetics says is the will of Atum. I could go on further there, but we'll keep that for now. The point there was getting at this meditation, or this idea of constant contemplation to attain true knowledge, to come to know this thing that has been described as God and many other names throughout the centuries and the ages. Ladies and gentlemen, I lost that point there, the being. Okay, there we go. Keeping a few side points there, but by expanding our consciousness in this way, we can merge with the mind of God. So we had number one was Hermes advises us to imagine ourselves in all places at all times. And we talked about that, and to embrace all opposites without judgment from this new perspective, because we know it's all part of everything, the whole. And then to know that we are immortal and to let that sink in. That's number three. And then number four is to see ourselves as still in the womb and both already dead at once. And so once again, more contemplation on immortality and being beyond a finite lifetime. And so we continue here with what Timothy Freke and Peter Gandy are saying. Mind is the immortal part of a human being. It is the divine light which emanates from Atum, or from God. Of all living things, though, and we learned this earlier, human beings alone have this divine quality, which gives them the potential to know God. Such knowledge is not intellectual opinion. Opinion is only a dim reflection of knowledge. Knowledge is a direct experience of the truth. It is certain and immediate. An enlightened being does not have opinions about God. He is one with God. That's amazing. Because as you know, if you've listened to me, that Wayne Dyer is a big influence in my life. And the first time I really understood this teaching that we're just getting at right now, this idea of, can you really know God? Because people will ask the question, why has God never spoken to me? And I think the answer was something like, well, you're not listening the right way, and you're not looking the right way. In other words, it already has, God already has, you just didn't think that was God and thought it was your intuition or happenstance or luck or something like that. But Wayne taught me that you can know God, and it is possible. And there are two different things, this idea about knowing about God and knowing God. And the difference between knowing and knowing about, or having a knowing and having an opinion, is conscious contact. Because you can know about something and have an opinion about it. But when you have consciously experienced it or had conscious contact with this kind of experience, then you know rather than knowing about. And Wayne has a great way of describing that. I have no idea where in his hours and hours and hours of speeches that, few minutes is. But that bit really changed my life. And it is the same exact thing that is being taught here in the Hermetica. As I'm reading it to you on June 28th in 2023, years after learning this philosophy, it comes back to me in an even more powerful way. And it is this idea, and it's so funny that we read there in the beginning, that same kind of philosophy that's being told again to us here is that for Hermes, this spiritual philosophy is, where does it go? Such pure philosophy is about rising above mere opinions to experience directly, using the God-given gift of our own little minds. And so it's about this idea of rising above opinions. And then here in the section we're reading today, it says that such knowledge of all living things, human beings alone have this divine quality to use that little mind of God that was described, or, as the saying from Christianity, man was created in the image of God. I think that could have been explained a lot more than, just the idea that, oh yeah, whatever we look like is what God looks like. That's kind of arrogant and mortal and physical to think that way, but that's just fine. Most people aren't mystics and philosophers and spiritual philosophers. So that's why we're here, ladies and gentlemen. And so if we were created in the image of God, then maybe that meant our capacity to function and use consciousness in a creative willpower sort of way and have a spiritual, immortal, and at the same time a dual physical and mortal nature. Maybe that's more like the image of God. And we can use this little mind that is like the mind of God or the mind of the cosmos. And I mean, if you missed any of the descriptions of all of that, it's way back here in the creation of humankind and the gods and the circle of time and the living cosmos and contemplating creation, and even the section we've been referencing, the being of Atum. But of all the living things, we have this divine quality, which gives us the potential to know God. And such knowledge, back to this idea of opinions, is not intellectual opinion. Like, it doesn't matter intellectually what you think you know about it, because it is a experience. Opinion is only a dim reflection of knowledge. And knowledge is a direct experience of the truth, conscious contact. So, you may be asking, well, how do we do this? I mean, Hermes has hinted at this somewhat, but this seems pretty difficult to do. But remember, in the previous section, Hermes told us that it is not difficult, as we all would imagine so much. Simply wishing and hoping to know God. Literally keeping this in your thoughts. As you go about your daily life, you will start to get very weird coincidences and things. And you'll be like, whoa, like, was that that couldn't be, but wow. You'll start to see these things. A lot of people call them synchronicities. And if you start experiencing synchronicities, then you can take notice of those things. Because most people will, like, I can't think of a correct example right now, but you'll think of something. And now, see, a lot of people could just, cross this off to pattern creation within the mind, and it's not real at all. But I'm like, man, it's pretty weird when you like think of something and then 5 minutes later, somebody's saying something about the same exact thing, and you're like, whoa, you know, is it like the reticular activating system catching on things, but like when you get a new car, you see that car everywhere. Where, were they there before? Well, who's to say? But I think there are these synchronicities that aren't just the reticular activating system, and it goes beyond it. But remember, simply wishing, is this difficult? That was what we were asking. Like, Chase or Hermes, is this difficult? And it's like, no, remember, there is no greater mistake than to have this power to not use it. And so you have the power to know God. Each and every one of us does. And it's important to begin from that first step. You say, all right, I do have the power to know God. I need to begin simply wishing and hoping to know God. And that is a road that leads to goodness. It is an easy road to travel, in the words of Hermes. Everywhere, once you are looking all the time to know God, it will come to meet you. And at times and places when you least expect. This is because it is all. And so it is a folly to want to come to know God and to say that this rock is not God. But that would take some contemplation. This was a very weird rock that I found, by the way. It had this section of some kind of sparkly blue stone on it. It doesn't look very sparkly today, but if you get it in the right angle of light, man, it shines. And there's a vein. If you know anything about rocks, leave me a comment and let me know what kind of rock this is. But you can see on the other side these few little blue pieces, and those run through, and it's actually a vein that goes through the rock. It's pretty cool. But see, we need to try pattern interrupt, ladies and gentlemen. We need to try to come to know God in all ways without saying that something isn't it and that we aren't it at the same time. And when you know that, that goes back to that meditation we were talking about, imagining ourselves in all places at all times, embracing all opposites, knowing we are everything and that we are immortal. And we can expand our consciousness by doing this. Hopefully, Hermes, we can merge with the mind of God. But I don't know, if we want to be, like I said yesterday, be careful. You don't want to totally escape this journey of our soul that is our lifetime. I mean, we're here for a purpose as well. Now, opinion is only this dim reflection of knowledge, and knowledge is the direct experience of the truth. It is certain and immediate. An enlightened being does not have opinions about God, but through this conscious contact, this direct experience of something, he is one with it, of the allness, the oneness. But we can be one with God through this direct experience. Now, this doesn't mean that you're like, oh, I'm just one with God now all the time. Remember, this goes back to Satori. Moments of enlightenment, instant enlightenment, or enlightenment in an instant. And you can pop in and out of it. This is also like, when we looked at the levels of consciousness in the power versus force in the eye of the eye and transcending the levels of consciousness. But it's like, you don't level up and then you're like level 70 consciousness master, which would be a very low level. But anyways, that's a different scale. If you've looked at the scale of David Hawkins and the levels of consciousness, then awesome, good on you. If you haven't, be sure to check that out after this video. The scale of consciousness is very cool because it shows the levels of experience of life and the quality of life through the different levels of consciousness, as well as emotions and states of being and stuff that equate with those, all the way from enlightenment at the top to, oh, what was the worst one? I forget exactly. It was the one when you're feeling like, we'll get to that another time. That could be another series, possibly. That would be a big one, though. Those books are huge, ladies and gentlemen. Still can't believe I even read those. But the experience of mind, the book continues, Timothy Freke and Peter Gandy say, we're almost to the words of Hermes here on this philosophy of coming to know God through direct experience. I still have no idea what I'm going to title this video. If you're getting value, consider subscribing. Thank you for being here. I love and appreciate those of you who join me in the chat room during the premieres. A1 has been my best supporter throughout the last 2 years of me showing up just about every week. And so I really appreciate you, A1. I really appreciate you, and no hard feelings if you don't ever make it. I mean, it's all good. I'm not like, somebody's got to be. This is all for fun and for, extrapolating on what we're discovering so that we can increase the quality of our experience through a greater understanding and awareness of life. Continuing, God wants us, so the mind is like a prize that may be won by human souls. That's a deep line. The experience of mind is like a prize that may be won by human souls. What does that mean? God wants us to immerse ourselves in mind and so become wholly divine by that process. What is meant by mind here? Thinking they're not just meaning like our own, whatever our mind is doing normally. There's like this deeper level of mind, this conscious contact. God wants us to immerse ourselves in mind and so become wholly divine. Yet, those that do are thought mad by the masses of ignorant people. Or I would say by those of us out here living in, ego, physical, survival functioning consciousness levels or states of mind. Those that have reached the level of oneness, we would just call them stone Buddhas. Or, it makes me think of the Bill Hicks quote again. It's like life is like a ride, and those that come and try to remind us and say, calm down, man, it's just a ride. We call them mad. And we kill those people. And it's like, what? But, we just don't want to be told that everything that we think is so serious. It's like, but no, my furrows of worry in my bank account, this just has to be real. But it's just a ride. If you've never seen that, look that up. I think it's Life is Like a Ride, or something like that. Bill Hicks. Anyways, these people that reach this place are laughed at by the mass of ignorant people. They're laughed at, despised, and even put to death. Holy cow, he's given us the Bill Hicks quote right out of the Hermetica here. I'm telling you, ladies and gentlemen, this philosophy has weaved itself throughout time in many different forms and ways. And these teachings can come to us from everywhere, whether it be comedians or, other spiritual teachers, or even just watching nature. But I just think it's amazing how sometimes these teachings that are here, that have been in this series, and each one of these lessons have been something that you've almost heard it somewhere else later, after the Hermetica, because the Hermetica was a long time ago, ladies and gentlemen. When was it, actually? Let's go back to the beginning and find out. The Hermetica is a collection of writings attributed to Thoth, or Tahat. I heard that from Matt Belair. He traveled to Egypt with Nassim Haramein and the Resonance Science Foundation. And, somebody, in Egypt, I guess that was Egyptian, modern, told him that it's actually pronounced Tahat instead of Thoth or Thoth. But, I mean, it's all fine for me. But anyways, the Hermetica, back to how old is this? Because I was like saying, man, it's funny how you hear a lot of these teachings throughout your life. And then when you read this, you're like, whoa, that's something I've already heard before. But this is coming to us in a mystical, esoteric, occult spiritual philosophy, a forgotten spiritual classic. It comes to us from the ancient Egyptian sage god, the mythical ancient Egyptian sage whose wisdom is said to have transformed him into a god. And also is credited with the invention of writing. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that goes into Thoth. But who was venerated in Egypt from at least 3000 BCE. So, do we put the Hermetica to 3000? Amazing, ladies and gentlemen. Very ancient knowledge. Very ancient knowledge. I'm going to have to figure that out in the future. I'm sure it's a quick Google search. So if you want to put that in the comments, that'd be appreciated. So, these people are laughed at and even put to death, like Bill Hicks said. Those that come to us and try to remind us that this is just a ride, that we are part of God, and, there is a oneness and we're all not separate. But as history shows, this has often been the fate of the wisest saints and sages, such as Socrates and even Jesus, if you believe he existed, or even those who think that Jesus was the last Pharaoh. That's for you, Christopher, I think, if that's your name. I remember seeing you in the comment section yesterday, so thank you for joining the premiere. But he seems to think that Jesus is it Jesus? Yeah, Jesus or Thoth, maybe, was the last Pharaoh? Hermes. I don't know. See, I'm getting confused now. Those would all be fascinating theories, though, and I've yet to look into that. And so that is very interesting. I mean, this is all fascinating when it comes to the lost wisdom of the ages, ladies and gentlemen, and the lost wisdom of the Pharaohs. Because we know his story, the history written by the victors, or even the oligarchs and the rulers and judges. Isn't it funny that that's what God translated to in Genesis as rulers and judges? Plural, gods and goddesses. If you didn't know that, check that out. Elohim. So now we come to the section, the knowledge of Atum and the words of Hermes. All right, ladies and gentlemen, you ready? The words of Hermes, or Thoth, on the knowledge of Atum. It begins by saying, to know Atum, you must share his identity. For only like can truly know like. Leave behind the material world and imagine yourself immeasurably expansive. Rise out of time to eternity. Believe that for you, nothing is impossible. See that you are immortal and learned in every art and science. Be at home in the haunts of every living creature. Make yourself higher than the highest and deeper than the depths. Embrace within yourself all opposites, heat and cold, hard and fluid. Think for yourself everywhere at once. On land, at sea, and heaven, imagine yourself unborn in the womb, yet also young and old. and already dead. And in the world beyond the grave, see that everything coexists within mind, all times and all places, all things of all shapes and sizes. Then you will know Atum. If it is possible to talk to the substance of Atum, then mind is the very divine substance. Although only Atum knows its precise nature, mind is not separate from Atum, but emanates from him like light from the sun. In human beings, mind produces divinity. Through mind, some become godlike. For as Osiris teaches, gods are immortal men, and men are mortal gods. Mind is the divine part of a human being, which is capable of rising to heaven. The material part, consisting of fire, water, earth, and air, is mortal and remains earthbound, so that he does not abandon the body that has been entrusted to him. Soul is nourished by fire and air, and the body by water and earth. Mind is the fifth part, which comes from light and is bestowed on humankind alone. Of all the beings that have soul, only human beings, elevated by this gift of mind, may attain knowledge of Atum. Such knowledge is not opinion, which is only a poor copy of knowledge, an echo in comparison with a voice, the dim reflected light of the moon compared to the brilliance of the sun. Mind and speech are great gifts that Atum bestowed on humans alone. Used wisely, they make a man like the immortal gods, only different in that he is incarnate in a physical form. When he leaves the body behind, when he leaves behind this body, mind and speech will be his guides, leading him to join the company of the gods and other souls that have attained the supreme bliss. Other creatures have voice, but not speech. Each living creature has its own unique voice, but speech is shared in common by all humans. Humankind is one, and speech is also one. It is translated from tongue to tongue. Yet whether in Egyptian, Persian, or Greek, the meaning remains the same. This is because speech is an image of mind, and mind is an image of Atum. By Atum's will, mind is like a prize that human souls may win. He filled a great bowl with mind and sent it down to earth, telling a herald to announce, "Listen, every human heart. Immerse yourself in mind and recognize the purpose of your birth. Ascend to him who sent this bowl. Those that bathe themselves in mind find true knowledge and become complete. Yet they are not pleasing to the mass of men. They are thought mad and laughed at. They are hated and despised, and may even be put to death. And that concludes the words of Hermes in section 17 of the Hermetica on the knowledge of Atum and how we can come to attain the knowledge of Atum and come to know God. Boom, ladies and gentlemen. That was an ultimate boom to wisdom and the wisdom of the ages and the lost wisdom of the Pharaohs, Hermes, and Hermetics, Thoth. Wow. What did you think of that one? That was profound. That was powerful. You must share his identity. Seeing that you are immortal, this immortal thing comes up a lot lately. And also the end there, which talked about human souls may win. This is like this prize. But apparently not many of us. He filled a great bowl with mind by Atum's will, and he sent it down to earth, telling a herald to announce, listen, every human heart, immerse yourself in mind and recognize the purpose of your birth. Ascend to him who sent this bull. I wanted to mention the bull is not like a Taurus, not like a bull with horns. He's talking about a bull, B-O-W-L. Just to clarify there, because sometimes a lot of astrology comes up in this mystical, esoteric, spiritual philosophy. Oh, and see, I want to show you because this part here about humankind is one and speech is also one. It is translated from tongue to tongue, yet whether in Greek, Persian, or Egyptian, the meaning remains the same. This is because speech is an image of mind. And so I wrote this down. I want to show you. If you're still here in the video, then you probably like what we do here. And so just give me 1 second here. All right. But see, check this out. This is my stack of ramblings that I actually wrote down. I mean, this is when I was working. I'd be like stocking some boxes. I forget what brand that was, but it'd be stocking some boxes, you know. And I'm like, interesting thought. Like right here, Victor Hugo, there's nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come. And the best I wrote is yet to come. So, you know, one day we'll go through this crazy, crazy pile that I got here of my ramblings. But if you're looking forward to that, leave me a comment. But somewhere, like, see, here's this philosophy. You cannot sustain a forced action. We must then also admit humility to ourselves. There will always be something you want to grow towards, no matter which goal you reach. So how do we become content / grateful of where we are while reaching for more without coming from a place of scarcity or a place of lack? And also without lying to yourself in the process. That's what I wrote on a piece of cardboard. That's incredible. That's incredible. Was it on here? I'm looking for this little bit though, because there was like 3 or 4 years ago, I think 4.5 years ago, I was living in the basement of a coworker before I moved to this place where I am now. But I wrote down this thing while I was listening to the radio, sports radio, 104.3 The Fan. Shout out to Stokely and Zach. Hopefully they're on right now today. But you can tell we're towards the end here, so hang on with me, ladies and gentlemen. This has been powerful and profound, and that was an ultimate hermetic lesson. But that idea, I wrote it somewhere on all of this stuff. Is this it? Our physical intelligence / our brain is designed to help us survive in 3D. Nope. But it was that idea that, isn't it amazing that despite all the different languages and things, despite a difference in language, thought translates to the same thing throughout all languages. And that blew my mind. And so I wrote that down on one of these things one day, a long time ago, probably 5 years ago now. And it comes to me again in the Hermetica. Leave me a comment. Let me know if you've had any of these things that were talked about in this series that was like something you knew like 5 years ago. And then Thoth, the ancient Egyptian sage god, is saying it in his very own words that were translated, anyways, from the time before. But it's like this idea that whether Egyptian, Greek, Persian, translated from tongue to tongue, the meaning remains the same because speech is an image of mind. And mind, this is the third level I didn't get to, translates beyond thought alone to mean the same thing, translates beyond language, but that comes from the ultimate overarching collective consciousness or God or Akasha principle that we are a part of. Oh, and then Hermes got to the elements finally. I mean, he's barely in the entire Hermetica referenced the elements, which is like, for me, one of the top lessons of Hermetic philosophy is learning about the elements. And maybe we'll do that eventually. I'm not sure technically if I should go that direction because it's not for everybody. And you don't want to just put that out there for everybody. But right here, he got to it. He said, mind is the divine part of a human being. This is right after he told us that Osiris tells us, well, I'll just say it this way, because this is what Thoth said. In human beings, mind produces divinity. So our capacity of mind, depending how we use it, is capable of producing divinity. Now, that could be taken as it's constantly divinity all the time, no matter what. But through mind, some, see, there's the key thing, some become godlike. For as Osiris teaches, gods are immortal men, but men are mortal gods. And so we can become godlike in this dual nature of ourselves where we're both mortal and immortal. And that was in the universal and the particular. Let me find that. Maybe. No. The incarnation of the soul, servants of Atum, memory ensures skill and nature, physical incarnation. Nature works alongside the gods. Ah, here we go. The soul, which is spiritual, has its own wrappings. The difference in character of the pharaohs are not determined by the nature of their soul, for all kingly souls are godlike. This isn't the part either about dual nature. I was trying to find the bit talking about our dual nature, because that goes right into what we were just saying there. But anyways, the elements, which was what I was getting at. Now, mind is the divine part of the human being, which is connected to the element of the Akasha principle. I think it's been long enough. We will reference this painting I did of the magician. It's like the magician before the magician, because it be difficult to draw the big old face in there of, let me show you this image. So the and the, the people and the animals and the creatures down there. That'd be difficult to add. But so what we're looking at here is the Akasha principle up here. And then you have the each of the elements, the air, water, earth, and fire. I forget The colors are weird and they're different than what you would expect, which is odd. But I believe, yeah, blue is air, green is earth, yellow water, red fire. Not 100% on that. But keep in mind, there are these four earthly, connective principles, and then you have the Akasha principle, which is the divine or the mind of God, which we are connected to. Funny enough, I did that painting 11/11, 2021. So I don't know what the significance of that date is in astrology, but it'd be interesting to look up. The last half of this video, or the last part of this video, could be its own video, but we're still referencing the knowledge of Atum here. And now we're getting into the elements. And so that top purple part of that imagery there is the Akasha, or the fifth part, which comes from light and is bestowed on humankind alone, it's said here. It is also the mind of God. And the non-material realm, it's like when you're thinking about creation or manifestation, going from the realm of waves and waveforms to particles, which is very fascinating in quantum physics. And quantum physics confirms that everything comes from nothingness. It's amazing. And the more amazing thing about that is most of what we see has come from a thought. And maybe even everything we see has come from a thought alone, whether it was the thought of the mind of God or the thought of man's or woman's little version of the mind of God, an image of such thing. But the mind is the divine part of a human being, which is capable of rising to heaven, it says, and coming to know God, as well as was described in this section. The material part, consisting of fire, water, earth, and air, is mortal and remains earthbound so that it does not abandon the body, so that we do not abandon the body, which is weird. So the body that has been entrusted to us. Soul, thought this was really interesting, is nourished by fire and air, and the body by water and earth. Remember, water being the magnetic, contractive, cold, cooling, more of the magnetic contractive principle, though, and the negative polarity. Fire being the positive, expansive, heat principle, positive polarity. It is interesting, the soul and the body are connected by this, or the soul is fire, so the soul is the expansive principle, and the body is the contractive, because the body by water and earth. And earth comes from, because remember, if you remember, we talked about the elements before, that air is the intermediary in between fire and water, allowing for the creation of earth. See, this is all up for debate. If you're a master at this, then you would say, no, there is no debating. You're an idiot, Chase. And that's just fine, because I'm here to learn and to study and to see where my mind takes me with this beautiful, mystical, spiritual philosophy. And that was, ladies and gentlemen, the section of the knowledge of Atum. There's one last point I'll mention here, which was something we mentioned yesterday that Wayne Dyer and Lao Tzu mentioned in the final verse of the Tao Te Ching, verse 81, is that we can attain through coming to know God. Mind and speech will be our guides, leading us to join the company of the gods and other souls that have attained the supreme bliss. The supreme bliss, ladies and gentlemen. Let's see how that was referenced in the last verse of the Tao Te Ching. The bliss True words are not beautiful. Beautiful words are not true. Those who come to know nothingness. Yeah, it was all about this closing message of this idea of nothingness, or the Tao, the world of 10,000 things. I was just seeing if I could find the sentence that talked about the bliss. But that's fine, ladies and gentlemen. It's difficult to imagine a world without things. So going beyond this idea of separation and oneness. God is a being, is the words of Meister Eckhart. God is a being beyond being, and nothingness beyond being. God is nothing, no thing. God is nothingness, and yet God is something. It's fascinating. Ladies and gentlemen, D.H. Lawrence, do the Tao now. The sage does not hoard and thereby bestows. The more he lives for others, the greater his life. The more he gives, the greater his abundance. Couldn't find the line about bliss, but that's fine, ladies and gentlemen. This has been a fantastic episode. I really appreciate you joining me here today on this deep, esoteric, spiritual, mystical, and maybe even occult, if you want to call it that, look into a way how we can come to know God, the knowledge of God, and how to know God. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I love and appreciate all of you. Thank you so much for being here with me, seeking after truth, seeking to discover the lost wisdom of the Pharaohs and the wisdom of the ages. Be sure to expand the description to get this book for yourself so you can put it on your shelf and so that you can reference it along the way through this journey of discovery. And remember, seek to achieve and maintain happiness through enlightenment. Seek to discover the hidden wisdom of the ages and the mysteries of our history. And remember also, there is no way to happiness. Happiness is the way. So the places that we've been telling ourselves, oh, when I'm this kind of person, or when I get there or have that, becomes irrelevant because we are already there. And then, hopefully, the entire journey is wonderful. All right. Love you, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate you being here, spending time with me. Remember, smash the like. It helps the algorithm. And leave a comment. Let me know what you think. And I'll see you next week on the epilogue and probably the final episode of the Tuesday Tao. Until then, ladies and gentlemen, be the change you want to see. Be the example. No, 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 no.